Hi, my name's Michael Smale and I'm the Manager of Security Outreach and Customer Engagement for Commonwealth Bank. So I work in our Security Outreach and Education team and work with frontline and also internal stakeholders to deliver presentations to our business customers and business groups. In today's presentation, we're going to talk about a typical cyber attack chain or the method attackers followed to commit cyber attacks. We'll then go through a couple of the most common attack types and you can think about some of the steps of that attack chain and how they present in those attacks. Following that, we'll then talk through some mitigations and I'll pose some questions for you to consider for your own businesses to better understand the risks that you may face. Before we begin, we do have a short disclaimer for you to read, which I'll leave up there for a minute. Wouldn't be a bank presentation without one. So have a read through that. Most important part is, unfortunately, no matter what I tell you today, I can't guarantee that you won't be a victim of a cyber attack in the future. So look to the education that you can take from it and start asking yourself those questions and make sure that you prepare yourself better for the future. So as you'll see on the screen, we're going to kick off today's session looking at what we call the cyber attack chain to better understand the methodology criminals go through in identifying and enacting an attack. From there, we'll look at the role phishing plays in many attacks and why it's so important to ensure that your employees are aware of the risks and common flags to actually look out for. This will take us into business email compromise, the most common attack type reported by businesses in Australia, in the most recent ASD cyber threat report. Then we'll have a look at a range of the ways that you can actually mitigate some of those cyber risks for your business and start to get you thinking about how you can better protect your organisation. Lastly, we'll share some resources that may be of use and have an opportunity for some questions at the end. So let's start off looking at how a typical attack may look and the steps that an attacker may take. So the usual steps an attacker might take when trying to break in and achieve their goals, whether that's financial gain or even theft of information. The first of those is reconnaissance, and it's all about collecting information, usually by researching publicly available resources, whether that be names of staff, positions and email addresses, from social media and domain names and IP addresses from public websites, but also from looking at data breach databases for any previously exposed usernames and passwords or other credentials. Information about an organisation and its suppliers can also be really useful. And it's why it always pays to think about what information is being shared publicly about both you, the important people in your organisation, and the organisation itself. Is it easy to identify who would have payment authority in your company via LinkedIn, for example? Do your suppliers have a quote from your company identifying you as being their customer? Because this might be useful information in order to impersonate a supplier or a customer, for example. Hackers will then often shift their focus to some technical reconnaissance, gathering information about the sorts of software that are being used or potential hardware that may be being utilised and ways that they might be able to exploit those. Next is initial compromise and persistent access. During this phase, an attacker uses the information they've collected in the reconnaissance phase to launch an attack through their target's employees, technology or suppliers. For example, they might exploit an unpatched software vulnerability, such as a bug in a particular version of an operating system, discovered through their technical reconnaissance because updates haven't been applied in a timely manner. Other attack methods might include exploring software and hardware misconfigurations. And there's been a few big attacks recently with this as their genesis. Hackers may also use social engineering, things like phishing, to target employees, crafting a custom-designed lure to trick an employee into revealing things like their passwords or even download malicious software to gain access to the victim's computer. After that initial compromise, an attacker will normally try to establish what they call persistent access, to make it quicker and easier for them to come and go without having to go to the effort of gaining access every time. When an attacker compromises a computer, all they have access to is what's on that device, or in the case of having a person's password, whatever information and accounts that person and password will get them into. This is why the next step for many attackers is to start snooping around and seeing what other computers they can connect to and how they can escalate their permissions to give themselves that privileged access to bypass security controls, find more valuable information. Company and customer data is obviously very valuable, but credentials that provide access can be extremely powerful too. Once an attacker has access to a large part of the network, including some of those critical services, they can then set about accomplishing their goal, whether that's spreading malware, stealing information, or otherwise causing damage or financial loss. We're now going to have a bit of a chat about phishing. So while I hear some of you groan with the feeling you've heard this before, phishing continues to be a popular method of compromising account credentials and delivering malware. So it's important we discuss it in the context of better protecting against it. A significant risk to organisations is phishing. Phishing refers to emails or SMS messages designed to override your better judgment and trick you into doing something we normally wouldn't do, like clicking on a link in a suspicious email, opening a malicious attachment, revealing sensitive information, potentially even providing credentials or even bypassing regular payment processes. These are some common phishing attacks on the screen now that are launched against business employees, such as attempting to convince them to provide their passwords and credentials to gain access to corporate emails, trick them into downloading malware via an infected attachment, or even visiting an infected website in order to grant an attacker a method of access back into an organisation. SMS phishing, or smishing, is a very common tactic that cyber-attacks use against customers to the same end as phishing, largely for the purposes of gaining credentials, such as passwords, or gaining control over devices. But it can also be used as an attack vector for malicious software installation, commonly called malware. While you may think the one on the screen seems obvious due to it using an old logo, what we're seeing more recently, particularly with the rapid growth of Gen AI, is that criminals are becoming more and more sophisticated and legitimate looking with their phishing attempts. CommBank themed smishes can also be reported at hoax@cba.com.au by taking a screenshot and sharing that way for our cybercrime team to action. We're also seeing some business customers being targeted by vishing or voice phishing, and that's where they'll pick up the phone and someone will pretend to be from CommBank to try and convince them to do things like share their one-time netcode or CommBiz token codes. It's to help combat this that we've introduced the caller check feature, which is where we can check with a push notification if it's you on the end of the phone, and you can do the same for us. As well as being able to identify all the signs of a phish, it's important to simply remain sceptical about your emails and SMS, and remember that email was actually never designed to be a secure method of communication. The best protection against phishing is stop and think before you click on those links or attachments in an email or SMS. Could it be a scam? What details are they asking for? Check. How else can I verify this? If it's purportedly from the bank, call the bank on 132221. Can I navigate directly to NetBank myself and log on from the legitimate site rather than clicking the link in the email or message? And of course, never entering sensitive details or passwords after clicking on a link. Remember, CommBank will never ask you for your banking information by email or text message. So we'll have a look at business email compromise now. Currently, business email compromise, or BEC, is one of the leading causes of reported financial losses to business in Australia. While we're going to focus in this part of the presentation on business email compromise, sometimes referred to as payment redirection scams, and email payment fraud, the mitigations we'll discuss are geared toward preventing many types of payment fraud, which remain a common way that businesses lose money. We'll discuss a number of ways in which BEC and payment fraud can occur and how you can better protect yourself from these kinds of attacks. The reality is, most cyber attackers are likely to be targeting organisations. They're financially motivated, so which means that you need to think about your business in terms of how to protect your financial resources. Unfortunately, business email fraud is a common way that cyber attackers will try and get money from businesses by means of manipulating staff into making payments. It's not to say that it's the only way, just that it's currently the most prevalent. This kind of fraud is insidious. While some variations may be considered a cyber event, the more run-of-the-mill varieties are generally classified as a scam because the target is a legitimate user with proper permissions, and they're the one making the transfer. So on the screen now, we've got a couple of examples of this attack method. Now, keeping in mind that while we show these as emails, depending on how you receive payment requests, there may well be other methods that you need to consider as well. Think for a moment how you receive your payment requests. Who do they originate from? Are they internal parties, external vendors, or the like? How would a would-be criminal subvert your normal process? What weakness can you identify, and how would you mitigate them? Supplier impersonation is the one method that is popular, as external parties have their own processes that are less likely to be known to you, but the same technique is often used to impersonate employees of your own organisation as well, especially where a scammer may pretend to be someone like your boss who you'd be compelled to act on direction from. So looking at the steps as to how this might unfold, first up we're going to look at what we call business email spoofing, and this is where they pretend to be an email from yourself. So the first stage being reconnaissance, the scammer studies the target to figure out, for example, key suppliers and what staff connect with them, which staff have authority to make payments, and when someone with payment authority may be on leave or travelling. Next we go to the delivery. So sender addresses are often spoofed, which means it appears they're the same, or in other cases it may be an email address that simply looks very similar to a legitimate business contact of the recipient, most often a colleague or a known supplier. Social engineering allows the recipient to be tricked into bypassing some of their normal business processes or their normal better judgment, thus providing payments or providing credentials that will facilitate payment, whether that be handing over a netcode or a one-time password. The final stage being the cash out. Obviously, this is their goal. The attacker will typically have the money moved to an account of an unwitting accomplice and then start moving it quickly from there, so it becomes very difficult to trace. The second method is true business email compromise, and it's actually a bit different to the more scam-centred email payment scams we've just looked at. It involves an attacker actually compromising the mailbox of a target so they can sit in there, monitor the mail that's coming and going, and then act to modify legitimate emails or inject their own messages into those email threads, for example. It often starts with stealing credentials. An attacker will source credentials harvested, whether it be via a fake phishing login page for a cloud email service, or if passwords have been reused, they may have found stolen credentials online via another data breach. This is why multi-factor authentication for email is super important, especially if you are using a cloud provider. The attacker can then search the inbox for invoices or messages relating to processing payments or HR-type emails, and then may set hidden auto-forwarding or filing rules to monitor those communications. The attacker is generally then waiting with their access to the inbox to intercept payment requests or information exchanges that can allow them to change recipient details and send it on to the intended recipient or make new requests for payment using existing invoices as a template. In some cases, it'll be the target that'll be on the receiving end of the tampered emails, and in other cases, the attacker may be using the target's actual inbox to send emails to their business's clients, asking for those payments so that they can cash out. We'll go on to the next screen and we'll have a look at a video that'll actually show this in action.
This video will show what business email compromise looks like from an attacker's perspective. All characters and entities are fictional, and any similarities with real people or organisations are coincidental. An email inbox is an attractive target for an attacker. There are a number of ways an attacker may gain access to an inbox, but one common way is by tricking someone to click on a link in a phishing email that directs to a fake login page, where their username and password are harvested. Once inside the inbox, an attacker's first action is often reconnaissance, looking for emails to understand normal invoicing processes and any potential outstanding orders or accounts. In this instance, Mike's company has received an order and his customer is chasing an invoice, creating a perfect opportunity for an attacker to disrupt normal invoicing and send out an altered invoice. To do this, they first download a previously sent invoice from his email account to use as a template. Next, they use a free online PDF editor to edit the details of the invoice, aligning it with what the customer would expect to see, such as the order volume, price, and client name. The one difference will be the destination account number, which will be one that the attacker controls. This fake invoice is then saved, and the attacker cleverly inserts it into a pre-existing email thread, making the fact that it isn't genuine difficult to detect. Depending on how well the customer's payment processes are set up to detect a change in payee account details, Mike may miss out on a payment if it instead goes to the attacker. How can you help protect your business? Protect email accounts with long, unique passphrases and multi-factor authentication. Reconsider invoicing alternatives if currently using email. Ensure you have a process to verify any account detail changes, preferably that includes talking to a person you know by ringing a trusted phone number. Talk to your IT service provider about how to protect your domain names. To learn more, visit commbank.com.au/safe.
Now, while that's an animation, and so it seems like it may be sped up for the ease of showing the problem that occurs, the reality is a sophisticated and confident, experienced attacker could actually achieve those goals in a similar timeline to what you just saw. The time they spend doing their research in your inbox allows them to be able to quickly adapt and make changes. So keep that in mind as you go on, and remember, multi-factor authentication is a very powerful tool against protecting your email. So now we're going to have a look at what we call a three-pronged approach to level up your cybersecurity. And it looks at the three pillars of people, processes, and technology. I can almost feel a powerful sense of relief washing over you upon reading what's on the screen now. But the slide's valid in many situations. It isn't always complex change required to uplift your security posture and help protect you. Do remember that not everyone has the same needs to provide that uplift, so use the information to start asking yourself and your organisation the right questions for you. At its heart, the three-pronged approach encompasses security-minded people, security-oriented processes, and security-conscious technology choices. From a people perspective, you're going to want to think about things like, are your staff being trained on how to recognise cyber risk and how you want them to respond when they see it? What kind of a cyber culture do you perpetuate within your organisation? Is it a culture of hiding bad news, or a very hierarchical organisation with a culture of not questioning requests from above, which could be a problem in a case such as employee impersonation, which we saw before? Good cyber hygiene. Do your people know things like not to share anything that can be used against them on social media, like their birthdays, other sensitive data, for example? And things like strong passwords, ensuring that you have strong, long passphrases rather than just simple and easy to guess passwords. Let's now have a look at a process perspective. So think about payments processes, for example. Do you have an authoriser that's different to the payment originator as an additional sense check? Minimising your data and double checking some of those details. So the amount of data being collected about us all the time when it's not needed is terrifying, and it potentially causes significant damage should a customer database be breached. So the lesson there is, like, if it's sensitive data you don't need, don't collect it and don't store it. Never over-collect or store data that could be attractive to an attacker that you don't need. Obviously, secure destruction of that data is really the process of removing that and getting rid of it when you don't need it as well. So technology control. So now this is things like backups kept in a location distinct from the information that they're securing, and very importantly, practicing recovering from these so that in the event you do suffer something like ransomware, you have confidence that you will not need to pay a ransom simply to get back what has been lost. Multi-factor authentication, we've spoken about that at length. It's so important to have to give you that extra layer of protection on your accounts. Automatic updates for software. Whilst sometimes with proprietary software you may not be able to have automatic updates activated by default, making sure you've got a robust process in place to ensure that your software and operating systems are up to date is critical to ensure that you're plugging those vulnerabilities. And along with those, there's extra protections. Things like antivirus, things like making sure that you've got the right protocols activated on your firewall to ensure that things like your emails are being identified, DMARC and the sender policy framework. Make sure you also use access control to lock down those cloud-based emails, but also other accounts to ensure that only the right people can utilise them. So let's have a look now at a few places you can go for assistance and ongoing support. Cyber risk is unfortunately not going anywhere anytime soon, and as we've seen, it can seem like there are often more questions than answers. So where should you go for some of those answers, or at least guidance on how to better answer those questions? Commonwealth Bank works closely with the Australian Cyber Security Centre and encourages Australian businesses, communities and individuals to do the same. On their website, they have a range of useful guides and white papers on various cybersecurity topics, from the basics of setting up multi-factor authentication on your personal email, through to guides shown on the screen at the moment on things such as like broad-based small business cybersecurity that looks at many of the more common risks and mitigations Australian businesses face, and also through to more complex matters such as procuring technology products and even services for your organisation. To see more, go to cyber.gov.au. When it comes to scams and cybersecurity, we also have a range of information and handy guides for businesses on our scams and cybersecurity protection for your business site. This includes links to our latest CommBank security alert sites, where we post the latest CommBank scams and current scam trends. The Signals Cybersecurity for Business site has easy to digest information and explainers to help you protect your business. We've also sponsored the Cyber Wardens program for small businesses, which is a collaboration with Telstra and the Council of Small Business Organisations of Australia. This program provides e-learning that allows organisations to train their employees in some cybersecurity essentials, and while initially intended for small business, many other businesses that don't have dedicated cyber programs are now using this to uplift the knowledge of their people. The fundamental e-learning provided is an excellent starting point for your people in understanding some of those key steps to improving their own security and, by extension, that of your business. Thank you for your time today, and we'll now go to some questions.